My name is Lisa. I'm 32 years old, and 3 years ago my husband died, leaving me alone with a newborn and a house full of people who said they wanted to help. Last night, my father-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "You want to see your son again, Lisa? Then do as I say. Otherwise, everyone will know. Everything. Even him." The hallway light flickered. My breath froze. He thought fear would keep me quiet. But what he didn't know was I had already started recording. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because what happened next wasn't just betrayal. It was a lesson in how silence can be turned into a weapon, and how one woman learned to use it back. The first time I saw his face after the funeral, the house still smelled of lilies and smoke. Everyone else had gone home. The casseroles sat untouched on the counter, and my son's cries echoed through the empty hallway. I was standing there in my black dress, holding a bottle, when Richard walked in carrying a box of my late husband's things. "You shouldn't be alone, Lisa," he said. His voice was soft, almost kind. "You can't raise a child while working nights. Let us take care of him for a while." At that moment, I thought he was saving me. I didn't know he was actually keeping me. I moved into a small apartment near the hospital and let them watch my son during my night shifts. Every Friday, I drive 3 hours back to the family house. It was an old place with a white porch and a swing that creaked in the wind. My son would run to me, sticky from ice cream, yelling, "Mommy," while Helen, the quiet, ghost-like mother-in-law, smiled faintly behind him. Those weekends were the only time I could breathe, or so I thought. Richard would wait for me on the porch, always with that same smile, a little too long, a little too heavy. He'd ask questions that didn't sound wrong until you listened closely. "Do you eat alone most nights? Your apartment, is it safe? Must be lonely after dark." I'd laugh it off, pretend not to notice the pause between his words. But every time I looked up, his eyes were already there, watching, measuring. One Sunday afternoon, I mentioned I was thinking of taking my son back home once he started walking. Helen froze mid-step. Richard didn't even blink. He just said, "Let's not rush, Lisa. You work better when you're not distracted." That night, I cried in my car before driving back to the city. The road lights blurred into ribbons. I told myself it was just grief, that I was imagining things. But grief doesn't text you at 2 a.m. "Did you get home safe? Are you sleeping alone?" At first, I thought he was just checking on me. Then the messages turned colder. "Remember, I'm the one taking care of your child. Don't make me regret it." I showed the text to Helen once. She looked at them, her face pale, then quietly deleted them. "He's just under pressure," she whispered. "Don't make him lose face." That sentence would haunt me for years. I learned to avoid him. I came earlier when he was away. I talked only to Helen and kissed my son quickly before leaving. But avoiding Richard was like trying to dodge air. He was everywhere. At church, he'd stand too close while greeting people. At family dinners, he'd talk about keeping appearances, his hand casually resting on my shoulder a second too long. Once, Haley, his daughter, leaned close and whispered, "You know, Dad's just trying to make sure you don't embarrass us." She laughed like it was a joke, but her eyes told me she knew more than she said. I didn't know it back then, but she'd already started helping him, planning stories, twisting words. One evening, after a long shift, I arrived to find my son asleep and Richard in the living room, sipping whiskey. "Sit," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "We need to talk about your spending." "My spending?" I asked, confused. He nodded slowly. "Some people are saying you've been using your late husband's insurance money irresponsibly." I told them they were wrong, of course. But gossip can destroy a family's name. I remember staring at him, my palms sweating, the word destroy echoing in my head. He smiled again. That same calm, patient smile. "If I protect you, Lisa, I expect a little loyalty, a little gratitude." He let that word hang in the air, gratitude. The clock ticked between us, loud and slow. Then he leaned closer. "You'll stay quiet, won't you? For the family's sake." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. That night, I slept in the guest room with the door locked. Every creak in the floorboards made me flinch. The next morning, Helen pretended nothing happened. She poured coffee, humming softly. "You should be grateful," she said. "He's keeping the family together." Grateful. The same word again. Weeks passed. The messages continued, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel. One night, after ignoring his call, I received a voicemail. "You're forgetting who holds your son, Lisa. Don't make me remind you." I sat on the kitchen floor, shaking, phone pressed against my chest. I wanted to call the police, but what would I say? My father-in-law sends me texts that make me feel owned? No one would believe me, not in a town where his name was printed on the hospital wing, the church banner, and the local newspaper's donation page. So I kept working. I smiled. I visited on weekends. I learned to survive by pretending nothing was wrong. One afternoon, when I arrived early, I caught Haley in the backyard talking to a stranger. He handed her a wad of cash, and she slipped it into her purse like it was normal. When she saw me, she smirked. "What?" she said. "We all have ways to survive." Later that evening, she asked me for money too. "I just need a little," she said. "Vegas trip. Don't make Dad angry, okay?" That was the first time I realized how tightly they all moved together like a single body with one brain. Still, I told myself to endure. Just until my son started school. Then I'd take him back. Start fresh. But life doesn't wait for the right time to break you. The breaking came one gray morning. In the study that smelled of stale smoke and leather, Richard sat behind the same desk where my husband once studied medical textbooks. On it now lay a phone. He turned it toward me. "You should be more careful, Lisa," he said. "A picture says more than a rumor." On the screen was a blurred image me, standing near a coworker in the hospital corridor, laughing. It could mean anything, but he made it mean everything. One click, and everyone will know what kind of woman you are. My throat closed. "What do you want from me?" He smiled, almost kindly. "Respect, and a reminder that everything you love exists because I allow it." When I left that room, my hands were trembling. I could still hear his voice even over the sound of my car engine. That night, I stared at my phone for hours. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop and titled it Truth. And I started saving everything. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the phone screen again, my laughter frozen mid-frame, his voice dripping through the static. By morning, I'd made up my mind. If no one would protect me, I'd protect myself. That's when I started recording. I bought a cheap USB recorder that looked like a keychain. I set my phone to save every call automatically. I even installed a small camera inside my purse, the kind that turned on with a tap. I wasn't planning revenge, not yet. I was planning survival. The next few weeks, I played the same game: pretend, smile, obey. But now, every smile was a mask. Every yes, Dad, a data point. I began to catalog the monster by his own words. He called often, always late, always when the night shift started. The phone would buzz between patients. "Don't forget who's watching your boy," he'd say. Or, "I saw you didn't answer my text. Busy with someone else?" Sometimes I wouldn't respond. Sometimes I'd whisper into the recorder after the call. Threat. 10:46 p.m. Helen still played the peacemaker. "He doesn't mean it that way, Lisa," she'd whisper on the phone. "He just worries. Don't provoke him." Her voice always trembled, like she was the one afraid to breathe wrong. But the fear in her voice confirmed it. She knew exactly what kind of man he was. I didn't know it then, but fear runs in families passed down like heirlooms. Haley, on the other hand, was pure arrogance. She'd show up unannounced at the hospital, sauntering in like she owned the place. Once, she cornered me by the lockers, chewing gum and smiling. "Dad says you're getting too independent," she said. "He doesn't like that." I clenched my jaw. "He doesn't get to like or dislike anything about my life." Her smile sharpened. "Sure he does. He's the one raising your son, remember?" I could feel my pulse pounding in my throat. I walked away without answering. She called after me, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Touchy, huh? People might think you've got something to hide." That line hit me like a punch because it was never random. They were building a narrative, one rumor at a time. A week later, the HR manager at my hospital called me in. "Lisa, someone's been spreading things," she said carefully, "about inappropriate relationships with a senior doctor." My mouth went dry. "Who said that?" She hesitated. "Anonymous. But I'd be cautious. The board doesn't like noise." I walked out of her office and sat in the staff lounge, hands shaking so hard the coffee sloshed onto my scrubs. I didn't need to ask who started the rumor. I already knew. That night, I drove straight to the family house. Helen opened the door, startled. Richard was in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand. He looked up and smiled like I'd just arrived for dinner. "Lisa," he said warmly, "you look tense. Sit down." I didn't. "You're behind the rumors. This isn't fires. It's not about it building to Sears." He chuckled. "Careful what you accuse people of. It might backfire." "Stop it," I snapped. "I just want my son. That's all." He put down the glass, walked toward me. "And you'll have him. As long as you play by the rules." "What rules?" He leaned close enough that I could smell the bourbon on his breath. "The ones I make." For a moment, I thought I'd faint. The walls seemed to hum. I wanted to scream, to throw the glass at him. But all I did was whisper, "You disgust me." He laughed softly. "Disgust is just fear wearing perfume." When I left, Helen followed me outside. Her eyes glistened in the porch light. "Don't fight him, Lisa. You'll lose." "No," I said quietly. "He's already losing. He just doesn't know it yet." That was the night I called Mark. Mark was a nurse who worked the same shift I did, calm, rational, older by a few years. We'd shared countless cups of vending machine coffee during 3 a.m. breaks, talking about everything from patience to loneliness. I never planned to tell him, but something about his voice that night made the truth spill out. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said one thing, "Then start collecting proof like it's medicine. One dose at a time." That sentence saved me. We built a system together. He helped me label recordings by date, create backups on encrypted drives, even hide one copy in the hospital's storage under an anonymous folder name. He taught me to stay calm, to never let anger show. "Fear makes them sloppy," he said. "Let him think you're still afraid." So I did. I visited every weekend like always, smiled like always, pretended to shake when he raised his voice. But behind the smile, the recorder in my pocket captured every threat. Once, he told me, "You should be grateful, Lisa. You owe me everything." I whispered back, "I know." The mic caught his chuckle. "Good girl." I wanted to vomit, but I smiled. Because now, that sound, that single laugh was mine. I didn't know it then. But those recordings would one day echo through a ballroom full of people. By spring, Haley's debts caught up to her. She started showing cracks. One afternoon, she came to me in the hospital parking lot, sunglasses hiding her red eyes. "Dad's getting worse," she said. "Worse how?" She hesitated, glancing around. "He's paranoid. He thinks you're plotting something." I looked at her. "And what do you think?" She shrugged. "I think if he goes down, we all do." That was the first time she sounded scared. When I drove home that night, the air felt heavier. The streetlights blinked like slow warnings. I realized the balance had shifted. Fear was moving from me to them. And that's when I knew I couldn't stop. Over the next months, I built my evidence like a secret second life. Every phone call, every accidental message, every hint of blackmail went into the folder labeled truth. I even started cross-checking his charity accounts. Mark helped me trace payments that didn't match the supposed donations. The more I found, the clearer the pattern became. Manipulation wasn't just personal, it was business. His entire public image, the loving father and philanthropist, was built on intimidation and control. Sometimes, in the quiet between recordings, I'd look at old photos, my husband smiling, our baby in his arms, and whisper, "I'm doing this for you." Because by then, it wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about ending it. One night, I tested the recorder before visiting him. Check. Volume clear. I whispered into the mic. My voice sounded steadier than it ever had. That evening, he called me into the study again. He looked almost weary, like a man who'd begun to suspect the shadows were moving against him. "You've changed, Lisa," he said. "I don't like it." "I'm just tired," I replied. "You're lying." He leaned forward. "You think you can fight me?" For the first time, I met his gaze and didn't flinch. "I don't need to fight you," I said. "You're already fighting yourself." He frowned, puzzled, but the recorder in my pocket caught every word, every pause. When I walked out of that house, I didn't look back. The night smelled like rain, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, not because I was free, but because I finally had power. And somewhere deep down, I knew this story wouldn't end quietly. I used to think monsters shouted, slammed doors, broke things. But Richard never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His power was in the quiet. The first wave came in whispers, comments from coworkers that sliced like paper cuts. Lisa, I didn't know you were that close with administration. Or, heard your boy's grandfather is someone important. Must be nice. Every rumor had his fingerprints, but wore someone else's mouth. Mark warned me. He's building a story. Make sure yours is stronger. So I kept documenting. Every whisper, every text, every suspicious coincidence went into the truth folder. Still, it got worse. One morning, I woke up to find a letter slipped under my door. Inside was a photo of my son playing in the garden taken that very week. No return address. No message. Just the photo. My knees gave out. I sat on the floor, the paper shaking in my hands. I told no one my new address, no one except the family. That night, Richard called. I just wanted to remind you, he said, how fast things can happen when people forget their place. My voice broke. What do you want from me? He sighed like a patient father. Respect, Lisa. Always respect. After that, I started noticing the same black sedan parked near my apartment building. Sometimes its headlights flashed once when I came home, not long enough to prove anything. Just long enough to make me afraid. Helen called the next day. He's upset, she said softly. You haven't been visiting. I'm being followed. I told her. You think that's normal? She hesitated. He doesn't mean harm. He just wants to feel in control. That is harm, Helen. There was silence. Then a small, broken whisper. I know. Her voice cracked on the last word. That's when I realized she was trapped too caged by decades of fear, calling it love. The next weekend, I forced myself to visit. The moment I stepped inside, I felt the air change. Haley was lounging on the couch, scrolling her phone, smirking. Richard stood near the window, half lit by the afternoon sun. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. I sat, because I had to keep him talking. You've been distant lately, he said. Ungrateful. I've been busy, I replied evenly. His eyes narrowed. Too busy to answer my calls? Sometimes. He smiled thinly. You forget, Lisa. Your silence is dangerous. People might think you're hiding something. Haley giggled from the couch. Dad, maybe she's found someone new. I looked at her. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I think I do, she said, tilting her head. You're not the only one who knows how to play innocent. I stood. I'm taking my son home next week. Richard's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Don't test me, he hissed. You think I'm bluffing? I can have social services on your doorstep tomorrow. I didn't pull away. I just stared at him until his fingers loosened. Go ahead, I said quietly. Call them. I'll show them what you've been sending me. For the first time, his face changed just a flicker. But enough. That night, I emailed everything to Mark. The messages, the recordings, even the photo of my son. Keep a copy, I wrote. In case something happens to me. He replied 10 minutes later, I've got it. You're not alone. Those words held me together more than sleep ever could. But Richard wasn't done. Fear is like a business for men like him, they reinvest it. A week later, Haley stormed into my hospital lobby, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lisa, when are you paying me back? You promised. I froze. I don't owe you anything. She smirked. Oh? Want me to remind Dad what you said about him last week? People turned to look. I could feel their judgment. Not here, I whispered. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp as alcohol. You think you can hide? He owns you. I stepped back. No, Haley. He used to. Her smile faltered for just a second. Enough for me to see the truth. She wasn't fearless, she was desperate. That same night, a message popped up on my phone from an unknown number. Clever girl. Keep playing, see how long you last. I stared at it until the screen went dark. My reflection stared back, tired, hollow-eyed, but still breathing. That's when I knew. Fear wasn't killing me anymore. It was teaching me how to fight. The next few weeks blurred together like bad dreams stitched to daylight. Every morning I woke up waiting for the next strike, a message, a rumor, a knock on the door. But nothing came, and that silence was worse than noise. Because silence meant he was planning something new. At the hospital, even small things began to twist. The head nurse started double-checking my charting. Someone left anonymous comments on the staff forum accusing me of unprofessional behavior. My locker was found open one night, though I was sure I'd locked it. Mark started walking me to my car after every shift. "You're in his shadow," he said quietly. "That's where he wants you scared and guessing." "I'm tired of guessing," I said. "I want to end this." But ending it meant stepping back into his world. So, I went. When I arrived at the house, Helen met me at the door, her hands trembling. "He's in the study," she whispered. "He's been different." "Different how?" She swallowed hard. "He keeps talking to himself. About loyalty. About how everyone owes him." I nodded, slid the recorder into my pocket, and walked down the hall. The door to the study was half open. Smoke hung heavy inside. Richard sat behind the desk, a tumbler of whiskey sweating in his hand. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Lisa," he said, smiling faintly. "You came back. I needed to talk about my son." He chuckled. "Always so dramatic. You could have just asked." He gestured to the chair. I stayed standing. "I know about the rumors," I said. "You've been spreading them." He swirled his glass. "Rumors? No. No. I just tell people the truth. What they do with it isn't my concern." I stepped closer. "You're lying." His smile vanished. "Careful, Lisa. Words have weight. So do recordings," I said softly. For a moment, his eyes went flat 2 stones under water. Then he laughed. "You think anyone would believe you? You're unstable. Grieving. A single mother clinging to paranoia." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The recorder in my pocket was catching every syllable. Then, in one of those rare moments of arrogance that only powerful men have, he leaned back and said, "But I admire your spirit. If only you knew what you're up against. I have friends everywhere. Police, lawyers, donors. One call, and your little game is over." I let him talk. Let him bury himself. Then I said, "You're right. You do have friends. But I have proof." I walked out before he could reply. The next morning, Haley showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. When I opened it, her eyes were wild. "What did you say to him?" "What do you mean?" "He's furious. He's tearing the house apart. He thinks you've been spying on him." I stayed calm. Maybe he should worry less about being spied on and more about being recorded. Her face drained of color. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" She backed away slowly, then hissed, "You're going to regret this." "I already have," I said, and closed the door in her face. That night, I heard footsteps outside my apartment again. The same black sedan idled by the curb, headlights off. But this time, I didn't hide. I stepped onto the porch, lifted my phone, and snapped a photo with the flash on. The car sped away. Mark came over the next day. We sat in my tiny kitchen, coffee going cold between us. "He's losing control," Mark said. "Men like him panic when their image cracks." I looked at the pile of USB drives on the table. "Then, let's make sure it shatters." We began cross-checking everything: donation records, tax statements, even video clips from his charity events. What we found wasn't just moral rot. It was financial crime. He'd been funneling money through his foundation for years. That changed the game. Now it wasn't just about me. It was about exposing him completely. When I told Helen, she cried quietly, "He'll destroy himself before he lets that happen." "Maybe that's what needs to happen," I said. For the first time, she didn't argue. The next weekend, Haley called me late at night. Her voice shook. "He's talking about sending people after you." I tried to calm him down, but he's losing it. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if he falls, I fall too. But I don't want to die on his sinking ship." I paused. "Then help me." There was silence. Then, a whisper. "What do you need?" That was the turning point, the first crack in their fortress. I didn't know if I could trust her, but I knew fear had changed sides. And fear, when cornered, can become a weapon. I hung up, looked at my reflection in the dark window, and said aloud, "You wanted control, Richard. Now watch me take it back." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Inside, the red light on the recorder blinked, steadily proof that the game was still going. But the rules had changed. The night of the gala was colder than I expected, that kind of sharp, metallic cold that cuts through fabric and nerves alike. The sky above the city was heavy with clouds, but the ballroom glowed like a lighthouse. Glass doors, champagne trays, and banners that read, "Celebrating 10 years of hope, the Richard Hensley Foundation." Hope. What a word to decorate a lie. I arrived in a black dress, simple, almost somber. Mark stood near the back, close to the audiovisual booth. We exchanged a single look. No words. We'd rehearsed this too many times to need them. The USB drive in his hand looked like nothing, but it held everything. The room hummed with polite laughter and the clink of glasses. The crowd was a who's who of the town: judges, reporters, donors, and in the center of it all was Richard, basking in the warmth of his own spotlight. He looked immaculate in his tuxedo, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, pretending he didn't have rot beneath the skin. Helen sat near the front, stiff and pale. Haley hovered close to her father, her smile stretched too tight, her eyes scanning the room as if she already sensed the trap beneath their perfect evening. When the orchestra stopped, Richard took the stage. His voice boomed from the speakers, full of that false humility people mistake for grace. Friends, tonight we celebrate 10 years of giving back, 10 years of building trust, of strengthening families. I almost laughed. Families. He used that word like he owned it. He went on, thanking the board, his wife, his late son, my husband, and then he smiled toward me. And of course, to my wonderful daughter-in-law, Lisa, who's endured so much and yet continues to be part of our family. Every eye turned toward me. My pulse drummed in my ears. I lifted my glass, forcing a smile. Inside my coat pocket, my phone vibrated once. Mark's silent signal. It was time. Richard raised his glass high. Let us toast to integrity, to compassion. The screen behind him flickered. The logo of his foundation blinked, then vanished. For half a second, no one moved. Then a voice filled the speakers, low, calm, unmistakable. If you don't listen to me, Lisa, I'll take your son. Do you understand? The room froze. Someone gasped. Another whispered. What was that? Richard blinked, confused, trying to signal the tech team. But the next recording started before he could speak. You owe me everything. Without me, you're nothing. Say thank you, Lisa. Say it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Helen covered her mouth. Haley's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Richard stepped forward, shouting, That's not real. Someone's manipulating. His voice was swallowed by another clip, his own laugh, smooth and cruel. Don't forget who's watching your boy. The sound echoed through the ballroom like thunder. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed. A few guests started recording on their phones. The giant projection behind him showed time-stamped texts, emails, transfers, each piece carefully timed to his own voice. I stood near the back, unmoving, heart hammering but steady. Every detail had been calculated, every image authenticated. Mark had built redundancies. Even if they pulled the plug, 3 hidden devices would keep the feed running. On stage, Richard turned red, then pale. He slammed his fist on the podium. This is defamation. Lies. But as he spoke, the final clip played, his voice, calm and slow. You think anyone will believe you? You're just a grieving widow with a dirty conscience. Silence followed. A deep, suffocating silence that lasted long enough for everyone to understand what they had just heard. Then, chaos. Reporters shouted questions. The board members backed away. Someone yelled for security. Helen started sobbing into her hands. Haley tried to reach her father, but he shoved her aside, eyes wild. He spotted me across the room. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He mouthed one word. You. I didn't look away. Slowly, I raised my glass and whispered, just loud enough for the nearest cameras to catch. You taught me that silence is power. Richard, I just learned to use it louder. The lights on stage blazed white as he stumbled back, reporters closing in like wolves. Mark appeared beside me. We should go. We slipped out through the side exit while the chaos boiled over. Behind us, I could still hear Richard shouting, his words tangled with feedback and panic. Outside, the night air hit me like cold water. I stopped at the top of the steps, staring at the street lights, the sound of sirens already echoing in the distance. Mark handed me his phone. On the screen was a live feed of the news breaking: scandal erupts at Hensley Foundation Gala. I exhaled slowly. It's done. He nodded. It started. We stood there for a while, listening to the city breathe around us. Inside, they would try to spin it. Of course. He'd call it fake, manipulated, anything but the truth. But truth, once heard, doesn't go back to sleep. I looked up at the ballroom windows, saw the flash of cameras, the swirl of chaos, the fall of a man who had thought himself untouchable. And then, I smiled, not the smile of victory, but the one that comes when a wound finally stops bleeding. I walked down the steps, the echo of my heels sharp against the pavement, each step lighter than the last. For 3 years, he had silenced me. Tonight, the world heard him instead. By the next morning, his face was everywhere. News anchors said community shock. Reporters said abuse of power. And the local paper called it the fall of a philanthropist. I watched from my small apartment, coffee going cold in my hand, as they replayed his voice over and over. The same sentences that once paralyzed me now looped on national television, stripped of their power, dissected by strangers. Helen called once, no words, just quiet breathing. Then a click. Haley's mugshot hit the screen 2 days later. Fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. She looked smaller than I remembered, like a child caught in her own game. When the police report mentioned that my evidence initiated the investigation, I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt empty. Because victory doesn't taste like justice. It tastes like exhaustion. That night, I drove past the old house. The gate hung crooked, the porch light off. A single window glowed. Helen, sitting alone at the table, staring at nothing. I almost stopped, but some doors aren't meant to be reopened. Back home, I tucked my son into bed. He looked up at me, sleepy-eyed, and said, "Mom, can we stay here forever?" I smiled. "Yes, baby. Here, we're safe." When he drifted off, I went to my desk. The truth folder sat on my laptop, untouched since the gala. I should have deleted it. I almost did. My finger hovered over the key. Then I noticed the envelope on the floor, slid halfway under the door. No address. No stamp. Inside, a photo of me and my son walking down Main Street taken from behind. On the back, written in block letters, "Justice doesn't last forever." For a moment, my pulse stuttered. Then, something strange happened. I didn't panic. I didn't shake. I simply smiled. I slid the photo into a drawer and locked it. Then I opened the laptop and made one more copy of the files onto a drive labeled insurance. Mark once asked me, "What will you do when it's all over?" I told him, "It won't ever really be over." Outside, the night wind brushed against the window. Somewhere below, a car idled, then drove off. I didn't look. I just whispered, "If they're still watching, let them. Because the next time they try to take what's mine, I won't hide in the dark. I'll make sure the whole world sees them burn." If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Because stories like mine don't end when the cameras turn off, they just go quiet until someone else finds their voice. Silence once kept me trapped. Now, it's what I use to listen, to prepare, to strike when truth matters most. So tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted the wrong people and paid the price for it? You're not alone. This story isn't over. Not for me. And maybe, not for them either.